The chamber was built to make visitors feel small. Ambassador David Cole understood this the moment he stepped through the massive doors. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top, drifting slowly through air that smelled of ozone and ancient stone. The walls curved outward in impossible geometries, covered with symbols from civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun had finished forming. And everywhere, watching from tiered galleries that stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral designed by giants, were the representatives of the Galactic Assembly. David counted at least 300 different species in the first few seconds. Some were humanoid, walking on two legs with faces that almost looked familiar. Others were clouds of light, or masses of tentacles, or geometric shapes that hurt his eyes to look at directly. A few existed only as sounds, their voices translated by devices that hung in the air like floating jewels. They had all come to see humanity. More specifically, they had come to watch humanity fail. Lieutenant Commander Priya Sharma walked beside him, her military bearing perfect, despite the fear David knew she felt. Behind them came the rest of the delegation, 12 humans in total, representing every major nation on Earth. They moved in formation toward the central platform, a raised circle of polished metal that floated above an abyss, so deep it seemed to have no bottom. The assembly had summoned them 3 months ago. The message had arrived through the communication relay that had mysteriously appeared in orbit around Mars, a device that humanity had been studying for years without understanding. The message was simple. Humanity will present itself for evaluation. Failure to comply will result in consequences. No explanation of what evaluation meant. No description of the consequences. Just a date, a time, and coordinates that led here to the Assembly's headquarters. A space station the size of a small moon orbiting a star that had no name in any human language. David stepped onto the floating platform and waited. The noise of the chamber, that constant background murmur of 1,000 alien conversations, fell silent instantly. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception that these beings possessed turned toward the small group of humans, standing in the center of their power. A voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, translated directly into David's mind through the neural interface they had been required to wear. The species designated human is recognized. The evaluation will begin. David had prepared a speech. 47 drafts, reviewed by every diplomat and linguist on Earth. Words carefully chosen to convey respect without weakness, confidence without arrogance. He had memorized every syllable. He never got to speak any of them. Before formal proceedings commence, the voice continued, the Assembly requires a preliminary assessment of the human psychological profile. A telepath will conduct this assessment. David felt Priya stiffen beside him. Telepaths. Earth's intelligence services had gathered fragmentary information about such beings. Species that could read minds as easily as humans read books. They were rare, valuable, and absolutely trusted by the Assembly to render judgment on new species. A figure descended from the upper galleries, floating down through the artificial clouds on a platform of light. As it drew closer, David could make out its form, vaguely humanoid, with skin that shimmered like mother of pearl and eyes that were pools of absolute darkness. Its head was elongated, and thin tendrils extended from its temples. Waving gently in a breeze that David could not feel, the telepath came to rest on the edge of the floating platform, studying the humans with those lightless eyes. I am Vex Morath, it said, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. I have read the minds of 4,000 species. I have witnessed memories of the first stars and the death of galaxies. There is nothing in your thoughts that can surprise me, nothing you can hide, nothing you can protect. David forced himself to meet those dark eyes. I understand, do you? Vex Morath moved closer, its tendrils extending toward him. Your species is young, violent. You have spent your entire existence fighting among yourselves, destroying your environment, creating weapons capable of ending all life on your world. The Assembly has serious concerns about allowing such a species to join the galactic community. We know what we are, David said. We know our history. Then you know why this assessment is necessary. I will touch your mind. I will see everything you are, everything your species has been, everything it might become. If I find that humanity is fundamentally incompatible with peaceful coexistence, the Assembly will vote for your immediate quarantine. You will be confined to your solar system until you evolve beyond your violent nature. This process typically takes between 50,000 and 200,000 years. David heard someone in the delegation gasp. Quarantine. They had suspected this might be a possibility, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it terrifyingly real. And if I pass your assessment? Then humanity will be granted provisional membership, access to trade routes, technology exchanges, diplomatic recognition. Vex Morith's tendrils stretched toward David's face. But no species with your psychological profile has ever passed. I tell you this not to frighten you, but to prepare you for the inevitable. David wanted to step back. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape those reaching tendrils and those bottomless eyes. But 8 billion people were counting on him. 8 billion stories, 8 billion lives, 8 billion human beings who had sent him here to represent everything they were. He stood his ground. Do what you have to do. Vex Morith's tendrils touched his temples. The connection was instantaneous. David felt the alien presence flood into his mind, like water breaking through a dam. It was cold and vast and utterly inhuman, a consciousness so different from his own that it barely seemed to exist in the same reality dot. And then something changed. The coldness vanished. The vast alien presence contracted, pulled back, seemed to recoil. Through the link, David felt something he never expected to feel from a being that had read 4,000 species.fear.vex. Morith's dark eyes went wide. Its tendrils spasmed against David's skin. Its mouth opened, and a sound emerged that needed no translation. A scream. The telepath screamed as if it had looked into the heart of a star. Its body convulsed, its pearl shimmer skin flickering through colors that had no names. The platform beneath it flickered and died, and Vex Morith fell. David caught it on instinct, his arms wrapping around the alien's thin body as it collapsed against him. The scream had stopped, replaced by silence. The tendrils hung limp. Those dark eyes had rolled back, showing nothing but white. The telepath had passed out. The chamber erupted into chaos. Hundreds of alien voices rose in shock and confusion. Guards materialized from nowhere, weapons drawn, pointing at the humans on the platform. The floating galleries shook as species that had never agreed on anything united in their alarm. Priya grabbed David's arm. "What did you do?" "Nothing." David stared down at the unconscious telepath in his arms. "I didn't do anything." But he knew that was not entirely true. Something had happened during those brief seconds of contact. Something had passed from his mind to Vex Morith's. Something that had overwhelmed a being who claimed to have witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. What had the telepath seen? A question echoed in David's mind as the guards closed in, as the assembly descended into pandemonium, as humanity's first contact with galactic civilization transformed into something none of them had anticipated. The telepath had touched the human, and something had broken. David held the unconscious alien and waited for whatever came next, knowing only one thing for certain. Everything had changed. They took David to a holding cell that looked like the inside of a pearl. The walls curved seamlessly into the floor and ceiling, glowing with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. There were no visible doors, no windows, No furniture, except for a single bench that extended from the wall like a frozen wave. The air tasted clean and empty, scrubbed of any trace of life. He had been here for 12 hours. Priya and the others had been separated from him immediately after the incident. He had no way of knowing where they were, whether they were safe, whether the assembly had already decided to punish all of humanity for what had happened to their telepath. The wall dissolved. David stood quickly, expecting guards or interrogators. Instead, a single figure entered the cell. It was one of the assembly's administrators, a being that resembled a praying mantis made of glass, its body filled with swirling lights that pulsed in patterns David could not interpret. Ambassador Cole, it said, its voice emerging from a translator device around its neck. I am Coordinator Helm. I have been assigned to manage this situation. Is the telepath alive? Vex Morith lives. However, it has not regained consciousness. Our medical specialists are attempting to understand what happened to its mind. Helm's internal lights flickered rapidly. They are not succeeding. David felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I did not attack it. I want that on record. I did nothing aggressive. We know. The chamber's sensors recorded everything. There was no hostile action on your part, no technological interference, no deliberate attempt to harm the telepath. Helm moved closer, its glass body catching the cell's soft light. That is precisely what concerns us. I don't understand. Neither do we. Vex Morith has examined species that feed on minds, species that exist as pure thought, species whose consciousness spans multiple dimensions. Nothing has ever affected it this way. Helm's lights pulsed in what might have been agitation. Whatever caused this reaction came from within your mind itself, from the structure of human consciousness. David sat back down on the bench. His legs felt weak. What does that mean for my people? The assembly has suspended the evaluation indefinitely. No decision will be made until we understand what happened. Helm paused. There are factions that want to quarantine your species immediately as a precautionary measure. Others want to study you to determine whether human minds pose a threat to telepathic species throughout the galaxy. And what do you want? I want answers. Helm's translator somehow conveyed frustration. You are the only one who experienced the connection from the human side. Tell me what you felt. David closed his eyes, trying to remember those few seconds of contact. The cold presence flooding into his mind. The sense of something vast and ancient probing his thoughts. And then the shift, the recoil, the fear. It felt like being searched, he said slowly. Like someone going through every drawer and cabinet in a house, looking for something. And then it felt like they found something they did not expect. Something that frightened them. What? What did they find? I don't know. I didn't feel anything unusual from my side. Just memories, feelings, the normal contents of a human mind. The wall dissolved again, and a new figure entered. David recognized the species from the briefings Earth's intelligence services had prepared. A Viridian, one of the elder races that had helped found the assembly over 200,000 years ago. Its body was a column of shifting smoke, held in a vaguely humanoid shape by some invisible force. Eyes like burning coals regarded David from within the swirling gray. I am Elder Thorn, it said. I speak for the Council of Origins. Helm's lights flickered in what looked like alarm. Elder, I was not informed you would be joining this interview. The situation has evolved. Thorn drifted closer to David, its smoke body curling around him without touching. The telepath has awakened. David stood. What did it say? Things that have disturbed the assembly greatly. Thorn's coal eyes fixed on David with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Vex Morith claims that when it touched your mind, it did not find a single consciousness. It found billions. Billions? Every human who has ever lived. Every human who lives now. Every human who will ever live. All of them, connected through some mechanism that our telepath could not comprehend. Thorn's smoke body flickered. It claims that human minds are not individual entities. They are nodes in a vast network of shared experience that spans your entire species. David shook his head. That is not possible. We are not telepathic. We cannot read each other's minds. No, but according to Vex Morth, you share something deeper than thoughts. Something that binds you together across time and space. Thorn paused. It used a word from your own language to describe it. Stories? Stories? The telepath claims that human consciousness is built on layers of shared narrative. Myths passed down through generations. Lessons learned from ancestors. Hopes and fears that connect parents to children, teachers to students, strangers to strangers. Every human carries within them the accumulated weight of their entire species' history, woven into the very structure of their thoughts. David remembered his grandmother, telling him tales of their ancestors who had survived war and famine and crossed oceans to build new lives. He remembered his father, teaching him the songs that his father had taught him. He remembered books and movies and conversations with friends, all the countless ways that human beings shared their experiences with each other. Was that what the telepath had seen? Was that what had overwhelmed it? The assembly does not know what to make of this, Thorn continued. No species in our records exhibits this characteristic. Individual consciousness is the foundation of galactic civilization. The idea of a species whose minds are linked through narrative rather than telepathy is unprecedented. Is that a problem? It is a question that requires an answer before we can proceed with your evaluation. Thorn's burning eyes seemed to grow brighter. The telepath also said something else, something that has made many in the assembly very nervous. What? It said that when it touched your mind, it felt something it had never encountered in 4,000 species. A psychological characteristic so intense, so fundamental to your nature, that it overwhelmed all of Vex Morth's defenses. David waited. The telepath described it as refusal. Thorn's smoke body contracted slightly. Not aggression, not violence, simply refusal. An absolute, unconditional unwillingness to accept defeat, to give up, to surrender. That's just determination. Every species must have determination. Determination? Yes. But not like this. Thorn moved closer, its coal eyes boring into David's. Vex Morth has read the minds of warriors and conquerors, of species that have fought wars lasting millennia. None of them possessed what it found in you, what it called the human refusal to die. The words hung in the air like a verdict. We do not simply want to survive, David said slowly, understanding dawning. We refuse to accept any alternative. It is not a choice. It is who we are. Yes, and that is what terrified our telepath. Because a species that refuses to die, that cannot accept defeat, that will fight and struggle and endure no matter the odds or the cost. Thorn's voice lowered. Such a species is either the greatest ally the galaxy has ever known, or the greatest threat. Which do you think we are? I do not know. That is what we must determine. Thorn began to drift toward the wall. The assembly will reconvene in 6 hours. Vex Morth has agreed to testify about its experience. You will be present. And then we will decide humanity's fate. The elder passed through the wall as if it were not there, leaving David alone with Coordinator Helm. The glass administrator's lights were pulsing rapidly, chaotically. I have served the assembly for 300 years, Helm said quietly. I have seen species evaluated and accepted, quarantined and forgotten. I have never seen anything like this. Is that good or bad? Helm's lights flickered in a pattern that the translator could not interpret. I honestly do not know. The wall dissolved again, and guards entered to escort David to whatever came next. He went without resistance, but inside. In that place where the telepath had found something that broke its mind, David felt something stirring. Hope. Or perhaps defiance. In the end, he realized they were the same thing. The great chamber had transformed. When David entered, escorted by guards and surrounded by floating security drones, he found the vast space reconfigured. The tiered galleries remained, still filled with hundreds of alien species, but the center was now dominated by a circular arrangement of raised platforms. Each platform held representatives from what David understood to be the Assembly's ruling council, the 12 elder races that had guided galactic civilization for longer than humans had existed. His delegation was there. Priya stood at the front, her face tight with controlled fear. Behind her, the other 11 humans formed a protective cluster, watching David with expressions that ranged from hope to terror. And at the center of everything, floating on a platform of golden light, was Vex Morath. The telepath looked different. Its pearl shimmer skin had dulled to gray, and its dark eyes seemed deeper, as if something had carved new space behind them. The tendrils at its temples hung limp, and its movements were slow and uncertain. Whatever had happened during those seconds of contact had changed it. Fundamentally, David was guided to a platform beside his delegation. He touched Priya's hand briefly, a gesture of reassurance that he did not entirely feel. Elder Thorn's smoke form rose from one of the council platforms. This session of the Galactic Assembly is convened to determine the status of the species known as humanity. The telepath Vex Morath will provide testimony regarding its assessment of the human psychological profile. The chamber fell silent. Every sensor and eye focused on the gray figure at the center. Vex Morath spoke, its voice weaker than before, but still carrying through the translator systems. I have examined 4,012 species in my lifetime. I have touched minds that spanned galaxies and minds that existed in single cells. I believed that nothing in this universe could surprise me. It paused, those deepened eyes turning toward David. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the galleries. Elder Thorn raised a smoke tendril for silence. Describe what you experienced, the elder commanded. When I touched the human's mind, I expected to find a single consciousness. Instead, I found a doorway. Vex Morath's tendrils twitched involuntarily. Behind that doorway was not one mind, but millions, billions, an ocean of human consciousness stretching across time in ways I cannot fully explain. You mentioned shared narratives, Coordinator Helm said from its position among the council. Stories. Yes, human minds are built on foundations of accumulated experience. See, not genetic memory, not telepathic connection, but something more subtle. Cultural transmission. Stories passed from generation to generation, encoding lessons and values and ways of understanding the universe. Vex Morath's voice strengthened slightly. Every human carries within them the echoes of every human who came before. They are never truly alone. They are never truly individual. A representative from one of the elder races, a being that appeared as a constellation of floating crystals, spoke. This sounds like a primitive form of hive consciousness. No, that is what I thought at first. But hive minds share thoughts directly. Humans share meaning. They interpret their experiences through frameworks inherited from their ancestors and modified by their own lives. They see the universe through eyes shaped by millions of years of collective experience. Vex Morath turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. It is not a hive. It is something new. Something I do not have words for. David listened, trying to process what the telepath was describing. Was this true? Did human consciousness really work this way? He thought about the stories his grandmother had told him, the lessons his teachers had taught, the books he had read, and the movies he had watched. Were these things truly part of his mind, woven into the structure of his thoughts? You mentioned something else, Elder Thorn said. A characteristic that you found disturbing. Vex Morath was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was barely above a whisper. Refusal. Explain. Human minds contain a mechanism that I have never encountered in any other species. When faced with destruction, with defeat, with the end of everything they value, they do not accept it. They cannot accept it. Their consciousness generates resistance automatically, without thought, without choice. The telepath's gray skin seemed to pale further. I touched the human and felt the weight of 8 billion minds refusing to die. 8 billion voices saying no, not today, not ever. It was overwhelming. Another council member spoke, a being made of liquid metal that shifted constantly. Surely other species possess survival instincts. This is not unique. Survival instincts tell a creature to flee danger, to protect itself, to reproduce before it dies. What I found in human minds is different. Vex Morath's damaged tendrils stirred weakly. Humans do not simply want to survive. They refuse to accept that survival is uncertain. They act as if their continuation is guaranteed by sheer force of will. And somewhere in the depths of their consciousness, I think they believe it. The chamber erupted into discussion. David heard fragments of translated conversation, debates about psychology and evolution, and the implications of what the telepath was describing. Some voices were skeptical, dismissing the testimony as the ravings of a damaged mind. Others were frightened, calling for immediate action to contain this strange new species. But some voices, David noticed, were curious, intrigued, wondering. Elder Thorn called for silence. Vex Morath, you have examined thousands of species. In your professional judgment, does humanity pose a threat to the galactic community? The telepath turned those deepened eyes toward the human delegation. David met its gaze and held it. I cannot answer that question in the way you want, Vex Morath said finally. Humanity is not aggressive in the way that predatory species are aggressive. They do not seek to conquer or dominate, but they possess a characteristic that makes them potentially more dangerous than any species I have ever encountered. What characteristic? Persistence. Vex Morath's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. They will not stop. Whatever goal they set for themselves, whatever challenge they face, they will continue fighting until they succeed or until every last one of them is dead. And even then, their stories will survive them, inspiring others to take up their cause. David felt the words settle into his chest like stones. You quarantine species that cannot control their violent impulses, the telepath continued. You eliminate species that pose existential threats to galactic civilization. But humanity is neither of these things. Their violence is a tool, not an impulse. Their threat is not what they will do to you, but what they will refuse to let you do to them. Are you recommending quarantine? Coordinator Helm asked. Vex Morath was silent for a long moment. Then it did something that made the entire chamber freeze. It smiled. David had not known. The telepath's face could form that expression. It was not a human smile, not exactly, but the meaning was unmistakable. I am recommending the opposite, Vex Morath said. I am recommending that we embrace humanity as quickly and completely as possible. The chamber exploded into chaos. Voices rose in protest and confusion. The council members turned to each other, their alien forms expressing shock in 100 different ways. Explain yourself, Elder Thorn demanded when order was finally restored. Humanity cannot be contained. Any attempt to quarantine them will only convince them that they are facing an enemy that must be overcome. And they will overcome it. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not in this generation or the next. But eventually, inevitably, they will find a way. Vex Morath's smile widened. Better to have them as allies than as opponents. Better to give them a stake in galactic civilization than to make them feel excluded from it. You are suggesting we accept a species that you yourself described as potentially more dangerous than any other. Yes, because the alternative is worse. The telepath turned to face David directly. You asked me what I saw in your mind. I will tell you now, in front of the entire assembly. I saw a species that has been fighting for survival since its first ancestors crawled out of the mud. A species that has faced extinction dozens of times and overcome it through sheer stubborn refusal to die. A species that looks at the universe, vast and cold and indifferent, and says, "You will not break me." Vex Morath extended one weakened tendril toward David in a gesture that might have been respect. I saw hope, Ambassador. Real, genuine, unconquerable hope. And I realized that in all my thousands of years, I had never truly understood what that word meant until I touched a human mind. The chamber was silent. David stepped forward, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "We came here asking to join your community," he said. "We came prepared to prove ourselves, to earn your trust, to show you that humanity deserves a place among the stars. But I think we have already shown you something more important than worthiness." "And what is that?" Elder Thorn asked. David looked around the chamber, meeting alien eyes of every kind. "We have shown you that we are not going anywhere. Accept us or reject us, help us or oppose us, humanity will continue. Our stories will be told. Our children will reach for the stars. Nothing you do can change that." He paused. "The only question is whether you want us as friends or as something else." The vote came 6 hours later. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. Humanity was granted provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly, and nothing would ever be the same. The celebration lasted exactly 14 days. Then, the Dominion arrived. David received the news in his new quarters on the assembly station, a suite of rooms that had been hastily modified to accommodate human biology. He was reviewing trade proposals when Coordinator Helm's glass form materialized through his wall, its internal lights pulsing in frantic patterns. "Ambassador, there is a situation." David set down his tablet. "What kind of situation?" "The Dominion of the Vast has dispatched a fleet to the Sol system. 2,000 warships. They will arrive at your homeworld in approximately 47 hours. The blood drained from David's face. He had learned about the Dominion during his briefings on galactic politics. They were not members of the Assembly. They were something older, something more dangerous. A coalition of species that had rejected the Assembly's principles of peaceful coexistence in favor of what they called natural order. The strong rule. The weak serve. That was the Dominion's philosophy. Why? David demanded. "We just received membership. We have not done anything to threaten them." "That is precisely the problem." Helm's lights flickered rapidly. "The Dominion has watched your evaluation with great interest. They have seen the telepath's testimony. They have heard Vex Morath's description of human consciousness." The coordinator paused. "They are afraid. Afraid of us? Afraid of what you represent. The Dominion maintains control through power, through the certainty that no species can resist them indefinitely. But you have demonstrated something that threatens their entire worldview. You have shown that there is something more powerful than force." David remembered Vex Morath's words. They will not stop. Whatever goal they set for themselves, they will continue fighting until they succeed or until every last one of them is dead. "They want to destroy us before we become a threat," he said slowly. "Correct. The Dominion believes that if they act now, while humanity is weak and isolated, they can eliminate the problem before it spreads." Helm's glass body seemed to contract with tension. They have issued a formal declaration. Submit to Dominion rule, or your homeworld will be sterilized. David stood, his mind racing. 47 hours. 2,000 warships. Earth's defenses were barely capable of repelling asteroid impacts. Against a fleet like this, they would last minutes. What is the assembly doing? Debating. Helm's voice carried unmistakable frustration. The council is divided. Some want to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty and commit assembly forces to protect your system. Others argue that humanity is not yet a full member, that our commitment does not extend to provoking war with the Dominion, so they are going to let us die. The debate is ongoing. David grabbed the coordinator's glass arm, an action that would have been unthinkable a week ago. How long? How long will they debate while my people face extinction? I do not know. Days, perhaps. The assembly moves slowly, especially on matters of war. Days. They did not have days. They barely had hours. David released the coordinator and strode toward the door. Take me to the council chamber, now. The chamber was already in chaos when David arrived. Elder Thorn's smoke form occupied the central speaking platform, struggling to maintain order as representatives shouted at each other in 100 different languages. The translation systems could barely keep up with the overlapping voices. David did not wait for recognition. He pushed through the crowd of alien bodies, climbed onto an empty platform, and spoke with a voice that cut through the noise like a blade. Enough. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned toward the lone human standing among the giants. You are debating whether to help us, David said. Whether humanity is worth the risk of war with the Dominion. Whether our provisional membership entitles us to protection. He looked around at the assembled species. Let me save you the trouble. Elder Thorn's smoke form drifted closer. Ambassador, you do not have speaking privileges in this debate. Then give them to me. Or watch me speak anyway. David did not back down. You accepted humanity into your community 2 weeks ago. You heard the Telepath's testimony. You voted, and the majority said yes. Humans deserve a place among the stars. His voice hardened. Now the first real test of that acceptance has arrived, and you are already looking for reasons to abandon us. A crystalline representative spoke. We are not abandoning you. We are considering the implications. The implications are simple. If you let the Dominion destroy Earth, every species in this assembly will know that your protection means nothing, that your membership is worthless, that when the powerful come for the weak, the assembly will debate while worlds burn. David pointed at the representative. How many of your species chose membership because they believed the assembly would protect them? How many will reconsider that choice after they watch humanity die? Silence. The Dominion is testing you, David continued. They want to know if the assembly has the will to enforce its principles. If you fail this test, they will come for you next. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, they will decide that you are not worth fearing. And then everything you have built over 200,000 years will collapse. Elder Thorn's coal eyes burned brighter. You speak boldly for a species that cannot defend itself. We can defend ourselves. David's voice was steady. Maybe not well. Maybe not successfully. But we will fight. That is what humans do. We will fight the Dominion with everything we have, and we will lose, and we will die, and our children will die, and our civilization will be ashes. He paused. But we will not surrender. We will not submit. And our last transmission, our final message to the galaxy, will be a record of how the Galactic Assembly stood by and watched while the species that refused to die was murdered by cowards. The chamber was utterly still. Is that the story you want told about you? Is that the legacy you want to leave for the species that come after? David looked at each council platform in turn. We came to you asking for partnership. We offered you our determination, our creativity, our stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The Telepath saw what we are and recommended that you embrace us. Now you have to choose whether that recommendation meant anything. Vex Morath spoke from somewhere in the galleries. David had not noticed the Telepath entering. Its voice was stronger now, recovered but changed. I have felt what humans feel when they face extinction. It is not despair. It is not resignation. It is something that your translator systems do not have words for. The Telepath descended to the council level. They become more determined, more focused, more dangerous. If you abandon them now, you will not be saving yourselves from conflict. You will be ensuring that when humanity rises again, and they will rise again, they will remember who their friends were. The debate that followed was shorter than anyone expected. When the vote came, it was overwhelming. The Assembly would defend Earth. The Mutual Protection Treaty would be invoked. A coalition fleet would be assembled and dispatched to the Sol system within hours. But as David watched the representatives cast their votes, he knew that this was only the beginning. The Dominion was coming, and humanity would face its first real test as members of the galactic community. He prayed they were ready. He feared they were not. But either way, they would fight. That was what humans did. The battle for Earth lasted 17 hours. David watched from the command center of the Assembly flagship, a vessel so large that it had its own weather systems. Around him, officers from a dozen different species coordinated the defense fleet, their voices overlapping in a symphony of translated commands and tactical updates. The Dominion had brought 2,000 ships. The Assembly had brought 300, but the Assembly ships were older, more advanced, crewed by species that had been fighting wars since before humans discovered fire. And they were fighting for something more than territory or resources. They were fighting to prove that their principles meant something. David could not contribute to the tactical decisions. He was a diplomat, not a soldier. But he refused to leave the command center, refused to hide in safety while others died for his people. Priya stood beside him, her military training allowing her to follow the battle in ways David could not. The Dominion fleet is fragmenting, she reported. They expected us to run. They did not expect the Assembly to actually fight. On the massive display screens, David watched ships die. Points of light that represented thousands of lives winked out of existence. Some were Dominion vessels, torn apart by weapons that humanity could barely comprehend. Others were Assembly ships, sacrificing themselves to protect the small blue world at the center of the formation. Earth, his Earth. 8 billion people looking up at the sky, watching lights flash in the darkness, not knowing whether they would live to see tomorrow. Elder Thorn's smoke form materialized beside him. The Dominion commander has requested communication. They wish to discuss terms. Terms of what? They have not specified. Thorn's coal eyes flickered. I believe they are seeking a way to withdraw without losing face. David turned to face the elder. No terms. No negotiations. They came here to destroy my people. They do not get to change their minds because they are losing. Ambassador, continued fighting will cost lives on both sides. If we can achieve a peaceful resolution, there is nothing peaceful about what they intended to do. David's voice was harder than it had ever been. Every species in this galaxy needs to understand what happens when you threaten humanity. Every empire and coalition and power structure needs to know that there is no mercy for those who come for our children. Thorn was silent for a long moment. You would risk more deaths for the sake of a message? I would ensure that this message never has to be sent again. David stepped closer to the elder. You told me that humanity's refusal to die was either our greatest strength or our greatest danger. This is where we prove which one it is. If we show mercy to those who showed us none, we invite future attacks. If we show strength, we discourage them. That is a cold calculation. Yes, it is. David did not look away. We learned it from a very long history of being prey. We learned that predators do not respect compassion. They respect consequences. The battle continued for another 6 hours. In the end, the Dominion fleet was destroyed. Not defeated. Not driven off. Destroyed. The assembly forces, following orders that David suspected had been influenced by his conversation with Elder Thorn, pursued the retreating ships and annihilated them. No survivors. No witnesses to return home with tales of human weakness. Only a message, broadcast on every frequency the Dominion used. This is what happens when you threaten humanity. This is what happens when you test the Assembly's resolve. Remember this day. Remember what you lost, and consider carefully before you act again. The message was signed by Ambassador David Cole of Earth. 3 months later, David stood in the great chamber once more. The galleries were full again, but the atmosphere was different. The fear and suspicion that had colored humanity's first appearance had been replaced by something else. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. The Assembly had convened to formally upgrade humanity's status from provisional to full membership. It was supposed to be a ceremony, a celebration. But David knew that the real business had already been conducted in private meetings and quiet conversations. Humanity had proven itself, not just in the battle for Earth, but in everything that followed. Human engineers working alongside Assembly scientists to repair damaged ships. Human doctors treating alien wounded with the same care they showed their own. Human diplomats building bridges between species that had been rivals for millennia. And everywhere, the story spreading. The telepath who touched the human and screamed. The species that refused to die. The small blue world that had challenged the greatest military power outside the Assembly. And one. Elder Thorn administered the oath of full membership. David spoke the words, feeling the weight of what they meant. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They were part of something larger, something that would carry their stories to the farthest stars. After the ceremony, Vex Morath approached him. The telepath had changed in the months since their first contact. Its pearl shimmer skin had returned, but those deep eyes remained, shadows of something vast moving behind them. "I never thanked you," Vex Morath said. David frowned. "Thanked me? For what?" "I nearly destroyed your mind. You expanded it?" The telepath smiled, that learned human expression that still looked strange on its alien face. "Before I touched you, I thought I understood consciousness. I thought I had seen everything the universe had to offer. But you showed me something new. Something I am still trying to comprehend." "What did you really see when you touched my mind?" Vex Morath was silent for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was soft, almost reverent. "I saw a species that has spent its entire existence surrounded by death. Predators and diseases and natural disasters and each other. Every moment of human history has been a fight for survival against forces that should have destroyed you long ago." The telepath's tendrils stirred gently. "And I saw that instead of breaking you, this struggle made you stronger. It taught you to hope when hope was irrational, to fight when fighting was futile, to love when love meant certain loss." The telepath reached out and touched David's hand, a gentle contact that carried none of the overwhelming force of their first meeting. "You are not the most advanced species in the galaxy. You are not the most powerful or the most ancient. But you are something that I have never encountered in 4,000 examinations." "What?" "You are the most alive." Vex Morath's dark eyes held David's. "Every other species I have touched accepts death as inevitable. They plan for it, prepare for it, make peace with it. But humans refuse. You rage against the dying of the light, as one of your poets wrote. You treat mortality as an enemy to be defeated, not a fate to be accepted. David remembered his grandmother, fighting cancer for 5 years before finally letting go. His father, working until his last breath to provide for his family. His mother, still alive at 93, still making plans for next year and the year after that. Is that strange? To you, it is miraculous. Vex Morith released his hand. And it is why I told the assembly to embrace you. Because whatever darkness the future holds, humanity will face it with that same refusal to surrender. And perhaps, if we are lucky, some of that determination will spread to the rest of us. David looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien species that now shared a community with humanity. They were so different, so strange, so far beyond anything humans had imagined before first contact. But they were also, in their own ways, the same. Beings struggling to survive in a vast and indifferent universe. Beings looking for meaning in the chaos. Beings hoping that their stories would be remembered after they were gone. Humanity had found its place among the stars. Not because they were powerful or advanced, but because they carried within them something that the galaxy needed, not hope, not the absolute. Unconditional refusal to accept that the darkness would win. David smiled at the telepath. The story goes on. Vex Morith smiled back. Yes, the story goes on. And somewhere in the depths of human consciousness, in that place where billions of minds were connected through meaning and memory and narrative, a new chapter was beginning, the chapter called the future, and humanity would face it, the way they had faced everything else together, not refusing to die, not ready for whatever came next.